Well, welcome again to today's Mothering Sunday service. A particular welcome if you're visiting St. Mary's online or in person for the first time, and if you've joined particularly because it's Mothering Sunday. As Jenny said, my name's Sasha. I'm a relatively recent addition to the congregation, but in true COVID time, I couldn't tell you quite how long. I joined here with my daughter. She's 16. She's flitted over the last few days between being glad she's not going to be in the room to hear it and hoping that she might listen online. So if, like me, you're part of the West African diaspora, there's one song that encapsulated all things motherhood. It was played at weddings, birthdays, and all special occasions. I can see some people laughing and nodding. They know the one. Can we hit it? The sound goes, please feel free to vibe.
Presenting you, Sweet Mother.
Sweet Mother.
Sweet Mother, I no go forget you.
Yes, feel free to clap.
Sweet Mother,
you can't really stand still or sit still.
For the suffer where you suffer for me.
Yes, I see dancing at the back.
When I did cry, my mother go carry me. She go say my
I'm just keeping it going because you're dancing. And there's the favourite bit. Stop, stop. Stop, 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 make you not cry again. Oh. So that song, Sweet Mother, in fact, I knew it was the right thing to do because somebody sent me a Happy Mother's Day meme today and it had the word Sweet Mother in it. And it was played, and often during the song, people would gather around either their own mother or the most senior matriarch, because that's how it works. Your own mother might be there, but if there's someone more senior, you better shimmy over to them instead. And it was an acknowledgement. It talks about, if I don't sleep, my mother doesn't sleep. If I don't eat, my mother doesn't eat. She's never tired. In fact, we know that's not true. She's always tired. But she never tires of caring. And it was a song that brings joy. You'll be pleased to know that I'm not playing you the whole 9 minutes. That was it. But the reason I choose this song is, one, because it's called Sweet Mother, but it also reminds me of my grandmother. My grandmother had an endless capacity for love. And she'd mother anyone who would let her, and some people who tried to stop her as well. The friends of all of my mum's siblings, my aunts and uncles, all called her Mommy. Get that? You have to say it properly. Mommy. And my friends all called her, and my generation, they all called her Granny. Guess which ones were the Anglo-sized ones. But she was essentially everyone's mother. When she came to London in 1952, she met with a really cold, like physically cold London, but also quite unreceptive and basically racist London. But within that backdrop, with her children, my granny decided to begin her work of love. Granny, she had the Saturday pot. Now, in one sense, it was just literally a big metal pot. But in another, it was an ongoing act of love, because what happened was every Saturday, no matter what her week had been like, whether it was hard work, losing jobs, not being able to stay where she thought she could because people didn't want her and my grandfather as neighbours, she would cook. And Sierra Leoneans all around, because we come from Sierra Leone, knew that Granny had the Saturday pot. And they would come and eat. Now, sometimes it was my grandparents' friends. Sometimes it was maybe children of people they knew or extended family. Sometimes it was people with a slightly more tenuous link. And I'm going to be honest, from what she says, sometimes it was people with no link at all. But they knew that if they turned up, they'd be fed, that there would be laughter and love, and there would be protection from the cold in all the ways that London was cold for them. There was warmth, and they were humanized. And she was given the title in Creole, All World Mammy, which means the whole world's mother. And over the years, that act of mothering for others continued. I remember when her goddaughter had a premature baby and was struggling with postnatal depression. Granny, because she was hard like this, took in the baby. Yes. Took in the baby. And the baby's mother came and spent every day. My cousins and I were spending that summer at my grandma's. Can't quite remember where our parents were, probably kicking their heels up in Sierra Leone on holiday. But anyway, I was dropped off, as were my cousins, at Granny's house. So was the baby. And every day, the mother came and spent time most of the day. And Granny cared, and she just picked up the slack. There was no judgment. It was just what was needed at that point in time. Now, we all chipped in. I mean, I was 8, so I cannot confirm or deny how much help I actually was. But we contributed. I held that very small baby, and that's when I learned that what babies lack in size, they make up for in volume. It was truly, I mean, for a very small person, she had a spectacular set of lungs. But, she grew bigger, she grew stronger, as did her mother, and then when they were ready to be reunited and live together again, they did. And she was forever taking people in. Sometimes we were like, Granny, or my mum would go, Mummy, what is happening? And she would say one of two things, because sometimes it was quite sacrificial. She'd either say, I do it for God, or she'd say, the Lord will provide. And those were only her ever two answers. Now, when you think of mothering, you might have a similar person come to mind who's acted in this way. They've been maternal to you, or whose capacity to love just seems unwavering. You might even be that person yourself who's forever giving and loving and sacrificially caring for those around you. And it's right on a day like today to acknowledge those who mother us. They might not be our mothers, but they do mother us, and those that we mother who may not be our children. And as Jenny mentioned when she prayed, inevitably on a day like today when we focus on something like specific like mothers, it can bring up so many different responses for people. Because for some people, this will be a day of real sadness, not joy. There will be those who lost their mothers. I was struck this morning by the fact that in June, I lost a really good friend of mine, and her twin daughters, who are 14 today, are waking up to their first Mother's Day without her. There are those of us who will have strained relationship with their mothers or with their children. There'll be those who long to be mothers, and for whatever reason, that's not where they are now, and that's hard. And there'll be those who are mothers who aren't enjoying their current stage of motherhood. Because it's not always cool to admit to your NCT or antenatal group that it's not quite what you imagined, or some days are ridiculously long. Like, why will that child only sleep when you're going like this? I remember making cups of tea and rocking back and forth and then realizing my daughter was actually in the cot and there was no reason to be standing by the kettle like this. But because you're it's so entrenched in you. And there might be some who actually don't want to be anyone's mother physically, but feel that they're pressured to do so. And there'll be some of us, like me, although I mother my daughter, I find myself in a position where my own mother requires increasing amounts of mothering. There's always this mix of celebrating on one hand and mourning with another. But it's in times like this where I'm not particularly steadfast that I look to one who is. Because whatever it is that we're feeling this Mothering Sunday, whether today is one of celebration or mourning or a combination of them both, actually it's safe to simply be in that place and know that that's okay. I'm grateful for a granny who trusted in God and modeled that trust in God to me. And my experience in times of challenge is that actually trying to do it all, trying to keep going, trying to be strong, trying to be all the things that are expected of you, it's exhausting. And then I remember, what would Granny say? Oh yeah, the Lord will provide, whether it's strength, whether it's emotional needs, whatever it is, the Lord will provide. And she taught me that I could approach him and know his love. And that love has sustained me. Now, there's a line from a gospel song by an amazing gospel writer and singer called Kirk Franklin, and it's from a song called Love. And my daughter made me promise that I would sing it rather than say it. I'm now wondering why I listened to her. But anyway, it goes like this. He loves me, even though he knew sometimes I'd fall, yet and still my name he called. He loves me. And then it goes, Jesus, I'm so grateful for your love. And it's that love that I want to speak about this morning. The love. Now, if we could have the reading up, I want us to focus on a text from Corinthians, which many of us will have heard, but, like the Bible, it never actually gets old. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. This was written by Paul, and he was one of the main leaders of the early church, and it was written to a church in Corinth. And Paul is stressing to the church the vital importance of love, the supremacy of love. The church was very concerned with their various gifts, and Paul says, these things won't be necessary forever, and some of them will fail, but love won't ever fail. Faith, hope, and love remain, and the most important is love. And he defined love as patient and kind, and it's not dishonoring of others, it's not boastful, it's not self-seeking. And I think people often have this passage read at their weddings because it's such a beautiful and articulate description of love. And who wouldn't want to have a love that protects and keeps no records of wrongs and isn't easily angered? But here's the challenge of the passage, because if we're expected to be loving people, who of us can really live up to this standard? I mean, maybe occasionally in certain circumstances with the right people and the wind blowing in the right direction, we might have it all together for a bit. But actually, these qualities are a bit beyond us on a consistent basis. Someone said to me, if you're in any doubt about this, reread the passage substituting your own name for love. For example, Sasha never gives up. Sasha cares more for others than herself, and Sasha is patient. And then ask the person closest to you whether that's how they would describe you. So I told my 16-year-old daughter that I was going to lead with how hard it is to be patient with a teenager. And she replied, actually, it's not because you have a teenager that you're not patient. Ouch. But true. I mean, I read this passage with some children at the school, and we talked about some aspects being more in our nature and which ones were harder, like love keeps no record of wrongs. Really? Because I still remember the day, and some of you will feel my pain as this builds. So I boldly took a toddler with me to Brent Cross just before nap time, because I had to pick something up from John Lewis. And in my head, I was thinking, I won't take the buggy because the walk from the car park to John Lewis and then back to the car will be just enough exercise for her to be really tired. Yeah, exactly. Some of you are laughing because you know the folly that lies within. And I also remember the spectacular meltdown that ensued outside John Lewis because I couldn't carry her because of whatever bulky nonsense. I don't even know what it was I bought because that's not what I remember. I just remember her lying flat on the floor outside John Lewis. I mean, don't worry, I'm not holding a grudge, but I haven't forgotten. But then because I haven't forgotten, years later, we'd been off to the park. There we were, walking along, stopped in an M&S local, standard. Picked up a few bits and pieces. We were treating ourselves. It was the school holiday. And came upon a woman with a baby in a sling and a toddler lying flat on the floor, going full pelt. And so I stopped, spoke to the toddler, who looked at me like this wasn't part of my plan. Who is this random woman? But it disarmed him enough to cry. And I said to the woman, I know it doesn't look like it as she stands there, carrying bits of shopping, looking perfectly sane, but there is a phase when you go from that lying flat protestation to being a little bit helpful. And, despite our very best intentions, these characteristics elude us, especially under pressure, tiredness, sleep deprivation, life. And the reality is that for many mothers, there is this instinctive love for our children, or those that we mother. And many mothers long to love their children as well as they can. But in reality, the strain of parenting means that we can't maintain perfection or the ideal that we set ourselves. I'm not always patient. Sorry if you are, don't judge. You're not God. But I'm not, and I know that about myself. And what I have learned also is to say that on some days, even when I felt like I'd done a really bad job, you know what? It was the best job that I could do that day. I release myself. I know that that passage is talking about God. It's not talking about me. I can try, and there is a goal. But my goodness. Have you ever tried to reason with a toddler who's tired? I'm not always kind. I'll let you judge on this one, but I still remember Amalia having this phrase that she went through, which related to anything related to food, which is, "Mummy, I can't like it." What do you mean you can't? Not even I don't like it, I can't like it. And at first it'd be, I can't like Weetabix. I can't like porridge. Then we got onto whole meals. I can't like breakfast. Mummy, I can't like it. Okay. So I took to steaming heads of broccoli with some garlic, blending them down and calling it Mummy's special pesto, and throwing it on pasta in an effort to get some vegetable matter inside her. Kind? Not kind? I don't know. But, it worked. It was necessary. Maybe kinder in the long run, but not honest. But like I said, thankfully, Paul isn't actually giving us that as a target to aim for. He believes that he's describing the character of the one person who flawlessly lived this out on earth, Jesus of Nazareth. When I was a child, whenever I stayed at my grandmother's house, she used to teach me the Psalms, old school, daughter of a Methodist minister raised in Sierra Leone. And I didn't know it then, but those scriptures really shaped my life. And I had to be taught in the King James. There was none of this modern versions or anything like that. And so there I was, very small, going, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Psalm 121. Or Psalm 1. She was a big fan of Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners. But actually, I was in a group of people the other day, and some of the conversation turned a little toxic. And I stood up and I said, right, I'm out, and left. And I thought, yes, Granny, Psalm 1, blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. That's not why I'm here. Without me knowing it, those scriptures, those seeds that my grandmother planted within me, those spiritual seeds, they grew with me as I grew. See, Granny had faith. And her faith inspired my faith. Her understanding was that God was always there, and that somehow, because of who he was, not because of who she was, things would work out. Not that they wouldn't be suffering. We know that's not how life works. But that God was bigger than what was suffered. Her hope was built on the fact that she remembered all that God had done, from scripture and from her own life. She told me when she was boarding the boat to come to London, no plane, boat, that she almost slipped and fell into the water at Lungay. And Granny couldn't swim. But in that moment, someone reached out. And because somebody reached out, Granny lived, and there was a Saturday pot, and loads of people experienced love. Because love never fails. And as Christians, we claim that all love proceeds from God. Indeed, he is love. And therefore, the invitation that we all have is to receive this love. It's a love that depends not on how good we are or how well we parent. Few. It's nothing to do with how patient we are, but it's freely given because of who God is, because he is love. And what my grandmother taught me is that if you open yourself up, as we open ourselves up and respond to this love, then we begin to love in the same sacrificial way. When we have no resources in ourselves to love, we are able to draw on God's love that never fails. And Paul wrote this letter to the church in Corinth about God's love. It's not written to an individual, but a church, a community. And We are welcomed into this family who support and uphold us practically and prayerfully along the way. A bit like that phrase about it taking a village to raise a child. So for all the mothers and mum figures trying to love, with some of them from very depleted resources, the love of God is available to renew that strength. But also, we're all here. There are others around you supporting you and championing you. It's not a solo venture. It was never meant to be. We have God. We have his son, Jesus Christ, who died for us. We have one another. We're not alone in this. We don't need to suffer. I remember a good friend I met through antenatal. We quickly realized that life with newborn babies is absolutely bonkers. And we created what we call the Realize and Release program. And it was a safe space where we could just go, this is madness. Or have you noticed this? Is this actually a thing? And we're just honest. Because if we're not honest, what else is there? Where do we get that help from? Our strength comes from the Lord, and we have one another. So my prayer for everybody here this Mothering Sunday is that you would be filled of the faith in the God who loves us from everlasting to everlasting, that you would hold on to God's unshakable hope, and that this God of which we speak, who holds the future in his hands, would hold you, and that you would know his love never fails. Happy Mother's Day.